Hi, this is Rabbi David Vigler, and with me today in the studio is Mr. Mudar Zahran. He is the Secretary General of the Jordanian Opposition Coalition and a former U.S. Department of State official who served in the embassies in Iraq and in Jordan. He's the holder of a PhD in the Arab-Israel conflict. He is a Palestinian Jordanian who also happens to be a practicing Muslim. Welcome, Mudar. We're delighted to have you here. What, pray tell, happened yesterday in Washington, D.C.?
There's all kind of stories you'll find in the media about it, but everyone is missing the biggest question about the whole problem. The terrorist attack that took place in D.C. against two young people, a young couple, has all the fingerprints of a government. I have been in the field, I have been inside the belly of the beast, and my educated guess is this has the fingerprints of a foreign government.
Whoa.
Who has the interest in bringing the fight back into the USA? Who has the interest of making Israelis and American Jews, who happen to be the backbone of the Jewish state, who happen to be the strongest lobby, the biggest financial and logistical supporters of the Jewish state, who wants to scare the living daylight out of them and send a message to the U.S. administration that we can cause you a lot of trouble, Mr. Trump.
You're
It's
talking
not
about
that
Iran?
Iran is just a small player. This is where most people are confused. This is where someone like me, keeps laughing off whenever I switch on television by the so-called experts you guys keep bringing on your national TV. The experts don't even know, they didn't even know left from right in this case. There's no Iran. There's no threat called Iran. Iran threat doesn't exist. It's China. China
Mm.
controls Iran. I've been warning about this for years. China controls the Iranian nuclear program. Chinese intelligence all over the place. China managed for North Korean missile scientists to create the delivery system that Iran now has. And I hate to bring you some bad news. Iran has a cross-continental delivery system if it's missiles. All it needs now is to fill them with nuclear heads. China is Iran. China controls the city opposite to the Strait of Hormuz, the most critical crossroad for energy of the universe. And China also has been training the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. So China is much bigger, much more dangerous, much more capable of anything you can think of. And this is where I can never repeat myself enough, Rabbi. This is where your so called experts have failed miserably. Since 9/11, they've been warning you against Islam, Islam this, Islam that, Islam is evil, and terrorizing you about Islam. And not a word about the real monster with fangs, claws, and money to burn. That's China. And we can go on and on, but let me count the following country who are on China's realm, satellite states for China. Egypt. Some people go like Egypt. I've been talking and warning about Egypt and China for 2 years now. Very few people bother to listen. Right now, the Chinese president, is about to visit Egypt. The Egyptian president, Sisi, he began playing the Chinese, monopoly game of taking heavy and quite heavy Chinese loans and not paying them off and investing the money in useless stuff like building a whole new so-called capital of Egypt just in the desert where nobody can afford even to rent. This is the Chinese MO. They go to countries, they make them rent, take incredible loans in a very soft manner, just swiftly giving them the money and dictating that they spend the money on something that's counterproductive. Of course, the dictators would take the money because if they borrow 50 billion, they're going to steal 20, 30 billion. then they've got the country by the throat. This we've seen this in Venezuela, South America, Africa, and now in the Middle East. And here are the countries who are on China's payroll or who are controlled by China. Literally, these countries are Egypt, Algeria, part of Libya, Jordan, the so-called Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, Syria and Assad, Lebanon, Qatar, and I hate to say it, United Arab Emirates. What's in common between all these countries? All these countries are hostile to the Jewish state. And all these countries support the so-called cause of Palestine.
So what's driving China? Why has China got an axe to grind with Israel?
Okay, first of all, I hope that you show that the internet is working properly because it keeps disappearing. That said, Google the Road and Belt Initiative. Most, again, even so-called experts have never heard about it. Road and Belt Initiative is reviving the Silk Trade Road for China and reviving another trade route that would literally, control trade around the universe. It passes around the Middle East. And in order for that to happen, the Middle East cannot be stable. I think strategic. I think, looking from above, the pilot eye, they call it, rather than people who just go down the weed into grassroots details. When you think strategic, the biggest problems we hear are posed in the Chinese initiative, the Road and Belt, is first, those countries have to be unstable, to be controlled, and China dictates and sustains its dominance. And also, those countries who are within the route of the Silk Road and Belt initiatives, they have to be under total Chinese control. In addition to the threat that Israel on itself poses for China, the threats are the following. One is Gaza. Many people do not understand that Gaza is exactly the point, the nail connecting the map of Europe, Asia, and Africa altogether. So this is the most difficult spot in the universe, Gaza. If that place is stable, those three continents would stabilize. In military science, and you can ask anyone from West Point or the war colleges, that there's something called the point of gravity. The point of gravity of the world, the entire world, is the Middle East. The point of gravity in the Middle East is the Levant, Israel, Palestine, Palestinian Nashtachim, Palestinian areas, or all of Israel, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and half of Iraq. Those are the Levant, the areas that actually dictate what happens next. If those areas are stable, the whole world stabilizes. If that area is unstable, the whole world will live in the chaos and remains controllable by the evil forces. To make a long story short, because we're not here to talk strictly about China, much of what you see has been invoked by the Chinese. And I can tell you information which I know you won't find necessarily online, that when the IDF was storming Gaza using most advanced technology, they noticed jamming of their devices by what could have been either submarines, very advanced submarines, or satellite jamming Israeli devices. And I will leave your imagination to think who were the suspects behind that. No Arab country has that technology. So there are very few, like two suspects. The suspects were, and I can tell you what soldiers and, generals have told me, the suspects were either China or Russia. So
Mudar, allow me to understand. So China has an interest in creating volatility in the Middle East, volatility in the Levant. Why wouldn't they just try to seduce Israel into their Silk Road like they do with all the other countries? Why would they want to have these countries at war with Israel?
Well, they've done a lot of good work trying to seduce Israel. 5 months ago, I was in Haifa. You go to the Haifa seaport. You will find, thanks to Hamas and the Houthis in Yemen. By the way, the Houthis are controlled by the Chinese too. This is not a theory. The Houthis have excellent relationship to the Chinese in Yemen. So they rendered the seaports for Israel unsafe, except for one, which is the Haifa seaport. So the Haifa seaport, you go there and you'll find two docks, two marinas where ships can dock. One is totally empty, and one is totally full and actually overcrowded with imported vehicles. Why is one of them is completely empty? China owns it, and Israel doesn't seem to want to use it, doesn't want to give it to China. And I'm going to tell you stuff which will make a lot of people who ask questions. Do you remember in the past 15 years, up until 5 years ago, you would hear of Shmuley in some unknown hick town in Israel, 18-year-old, he invented some stupid, idiotic application of how to make, biscuits or something like that. And suddenly the application has been sold for $5 million. And people are like, oh, yes, there's incredible innovation in Israel. But there was a point where China was basically, China was drowning Israel with its own investment of technology. Those investments were not because they love Israeli technology. Trust me, they've stolen a lot of Israeli technology. They're using, and this is everything I'm telling you here now, is stuff you will not find anywhere in public. A lot of the Israeli technology was stolen and used in Chinese fighter jets. This came from Israel. That said, it's stolen. They have not paid for it. At the same time, the reason they were buying those companies left and right, and I'm talking billions of dollars, is also to control certain people in Israel. They were not able to do it because Israel has one of the best intelligence apparatus in the world. They were simply not able to buy Israeli officials. Yes, there has been a few bad apples here and there, but you cannot buy the Israeli government the way you bought the Egyptian government. The Egyptian government was, up until 6-7 years ago, all US all the way, USA all the way. Now it's Chinese. Jordan's king. Until recently, until like 15 years ago, he flipped into the Chinese side. And now, before we waste all of our time talking about China, this is not China, bro. This is a doctrine in the American establishment in Washington, the old establishment of empowering China at the expense of the United States. This is, I'm talking George Bush Sr. This is not a conspiracy theory. You really need to just follow what they're doing. All these special, preferential trade deals for China, no tariff, even subsidizing freight. So basically, you're even importing the stuff of subsidized freight for China. This is 30 years old now. This has been going on for 30 years until Trump stopped it. And this has been empowered by crazy maniacs, mishogas in DC, who simply believe that we need to empower China to create a global balance because the United States is, such a hateful country, because the American people believe in them ruling, not the government, and also the American people have guns. So this is a very difficult country, very difficult people to control. Same applies to Israel. It's incredibly difficult to control the people of Israel. They're all soldiers. They're all trained. They know how to use weapons. If you want to press them against their will, you have to deal with them. So both Americans and Israelis are bad actors in their opinion. And those same people, I'm talking Bush Jr., Bush Sr., Cheney, Condoleezza Rice, and the Rumsfeld, all those usual suspects, they are the ones who empower China deliberately. And Trump was absolutely right, regardless of what you think of the man. It's American wealth that has been exported through China. So how does this relate to our discussion today? You
That's
bring a
right.
Palestinian Jordanian to talk about Palestine/Israel
And
and
we're talking about
end up
China.
talking about China because it all begins at China and ends at China. Who think supported Hamas all that time? Who you think made it difficult to outdo Hamas for 20 years?
So you're saying that China is motivated by economical motivations,
And the world domination plus economic benefits.
world domination. So how do you feel then about Trump's plan for Gaza?
It's very logical. It's the only plan there is, and this is why people, misjudged the man. They thought he was crazy. Like, what kind of president is interested in a hick seaport somewhere in Israel? Like, what people called him crazy, insane, all kind of name. In reality, he's doing exactly following the advice of his very well informed advisors of just what I told you. Gaza is the balance point for three continents. You control it, you control the world. And this is why China made sure it's one of its puppets was in control of Gaza for 20 years. This is why they made sure the Egyptian intelligence supported Hamas with weapons and food. This is how they made sure that the Jordanian government and Jordanian intelligence supported Hamas with influence and lobbying, how Qatar supported it with money. Those are all Chinese surrogates. And this is where Israel is a problem. It's not only that you cannot buy Jews, you cannot buy Israelis or the Israeli government. Yes, there are corrupt idiots in there, but you can't buy Israel. Simple. Unless you want World War III, really. So that's not happening. In addition, there's the fact that Israel was and still is thinking about the Ben Gurion Canal. The Ben Gurion Canal
from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean.
Yes, that would kill the Suez Canal, which is now controlled by China. So that's a big problem.
Is that actually still on the table, the Ben Gurion Canal?
It's going to remain on the table. As long as China controls Egypt, this is going to remain on the table because it's an existential threat for both the United States and Israel. If China keeps its grip on that place, there's also the challenge of the trade route from United Arab Emirates passing through Saudi Arabia, then Jordan, then Israel, then Europe. So it's over bypassing the Chinese dominance, which is against everything China wants.
Very, very interesting. So you're actually putting some rational explanation as to why it is that these countries are coordinating this insane war against Israel from every which direction. But what would have prompted October 7th? What would have prompted the attack, the massacres of October 7th?
Okay. October 7th never came as a surprise. In the intelligence world, you always know. And yes, October 7th took place in October. We knew, the intelligence circles knew about a certain attack in which Israeli hostages, a good number of Israeli hostages will be taken. And we knew about it in March. But we never thought it would come from Gaza because Hamas was playing low. Hamas was being nice. Israeli government was being helpful of Hamas as a stable force. Yes, they're terrorists, but Israeli government thought that, at least it's the devil we know, and we can keep them under control. We're allowing Qatar to send them money. We're allowing their people to work in Israel, up to 20,000 people. We're allowing them goods. So they are people we can control. Well, it's not about ideology like many, excuse my language, fools assume. It's not as simple as that. The ones who went and killed and raped Jewish women and burnt Israeli babies alive, and this is, by the way, not a myth, this is a fact. Israeli babies were burnt alive, and I can tell you the details later. But that said, those were maniacs with ideology and radical Islam ideology. But the ones who pushed them into this whole thing knew exactly what they were doing. And look at us today. What's this war in Gaza doing? It's delaying the attack in Iran. It's rendering the Ben Gurion Canal impossible for now. So they felt the threat. They felt that things would change. So they pushed this to delay what was about to happen. And they're thinking of other stuff too. And I hate to tell you this. There is a 7 October in the making, another 7 October in the making as we speak.
Planned
I
by who?
repeat, there is another 7th of October in the making as we speak.
Who do you
This
think is
time
planning
it's
it?
going to
Hamas?
come from the Jordanian borders. It's going to come from the Jordanian borders. And I want you to remember every word because I hope it will never happen. But at
Man,
least if God forbids it happens, then we have a reference to blame those who didn't take action. There is a 7th of October being carefully planned through the Jordanian borders with full involvement of multiple governments and countries. And that thing, they're planning for it in the span of the next 9 months. I cannot say more about that because any more about that is definitely above my pay rate.
but
But
who
all I
would be
can tell
perpetrating
you,
it?
all I can
Who
tell
would
you
be?
is it involves multiple Arab countries. The Jordanian intelligence slash Jordanian government is not innocent. They're fully involved in it. And it helps, it scores a few points. It's like killing multiple birds with one stone. And it's not going to be against them. Some people say, "Come on, you're telling me the Jordanian government wants to compromise its borders?" Yes, because we how many times were Jordanian officials caught smuggling weapons inside Israel using Jordanian government vehicles? The last big catch was a Jordanian parliament member who's very closely tied to the King of Jordan, and who the King of Jordan has managed to get him released from Israel. He was caught with, I forgot how many weapons, it was like hundreds of guns and machine guns, and
But Mudar, what would be the purpose? What would be the purpose of a Jordanian invasion of Israel in another
there will
October
not be a
7th, God
Jordanian
forbid?
invasion. There's no such thing. Jordan cannot invade Israel. What we will have is crazy maniacs invoking trouble at the borders, going inside, hurting Jews, possibly killing a couple in the in a couple of towns, killing people in a couple of towns, and then retreating back to Jordan, and then the King of Jordan will get all the sympathy of the universe because it will appear as if his borders are compromised and he needs help, and he will again make himself look as the only option because everyone else is crazy according to him. And it will also involve destabilizing Israel across its greatest and longest borders. Let me be clear, the hand of Iran slash China extends through Iraq. George Bush Jr. handed Iraq on a silver platter to the Iranians. There's evidence of that, unquestionable evidence that he did that. I was an eyewitness to that when I was working for the Department of State. Everyone knows he does that. He doesn't even deny it. Rumsfeld never denied it. On television, he said our problems are with the Sunnis, not with the Shiites.
Mudar, let me ask you an important question. So we've spoken a lot about China. We're listening about what you're envisioning in the worst case scenario, God forbid. But let's talk about the positive. What would it take for there to be peace in the Middle East? You as a Jordanian, Palestinian, a practicing Muslim, what do you think with your PhD in Arab-Israeli relations, the conflict? What would it take to bring peace in the Middle East?
Why do we still have the Palestinian cause? We've got people since 1948 who have been stateless, who have been labeled refugees for 77 years now. This is why we have a Palestinian cause, because we have Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, Palestinian refugees in Egypt, in Jordan, in Syria, and Kuwait, in Iraq. Those people are being used against their will, I repeat, against their will, as cannon fodder to fuel the Arab-Israeli conflict, which is a conflict which foreign sources, including the globalist Western forces, have been fixated on keeping that conflict alive for as
Perpetuating the
long as
misery.
possible. What?
Well, I think that if not for the United Nations, there probably would not be a Palestinian cause, because it's the United Nations that have created this UNRWA organization that
Let
treats.
me be clear, please. Let me be clear. Let me just vaporize the myth. Some people, I'm not going to use negative words, some uninformed people keep saying, oh, because there's UNRWA, the Palestinians get benefits from the UNRWA. This is why they remain refugees. UNRWA provides nothing. I repeat, UNRWA provides nothing. The only thing UNRWA provides is schools, school education, and that usually because Palestinians in those countries are not, living there free of charge. They pay taxes like everyone else. So that's what the state should offer. Otherwise, we have not, as a Palestinian, I haven't seen anything being given to me and to my folks from the Palestinians, not in any of the countries I've been to, but from UNRWA. So UNRWA provides nothing. The problem is the elephant in the room. The Palestinians want Israel to liberate Palestine. Why? Because they don't have a country. The Palestinians have a country. We already have a state. We have
Where's that?
Jordan. Palestine. 78% of historical Palestine is called Jordan today. 78% of historical Palestine. And those Jews, they are suckers. They barely settled for 22%. And we took 78% and we just are not being allowed to practice citizenship in our own country. Jordan is an ultimate apartheid state. Jordan is the only remaining apartheid state in the world. Jordan follows Nazi tactics against the Palestinians.
By not giving them equal rights.
Not only not giving them equal rights, there are methods they use to destroy the Palestinian majority in Jordan. Example of that is cracking down on Palestinian businesses. The Palestinians, we are proudly, and I keep repeating this, we are proudly the Jews of the Arabs. Palestinians, some DNA studies, there's one DNA study that argues for 82% of Palestinians being of Jewish heritage. I know my villages, my collective of villages in out of sight of Jerusalem, at Bet Shemesh, 8 villages, I know we were all Jews until 110 years ago, we converted because of Ottoman pressure. I'm proudly a Muslim, I practice a Muslim, but I know Palestinians have been the Jews of the Middle East. We've built countries from nothing, including what's today called Jordan. Jordan was a unfertile desert. Go to Amman. We received nothing from the government. The Palestinians have built the education system, the infrastructure, the business system, the second largest bank in the Middle East, the Arab Bank. And guess what the owners of the bank, what their last name is? Showman. The Showman family, a Palestinian Muslim family who are called Showman for God's sake. I mean, that name is as Jewish as a bagel, Showman. The Showman family, so we are innovative. We built Kuwait from nothing. We built Jordan from nothing. We built both the education and health system of Qatar and the United Arab Emirates.
So Mudar, let me just set the record straight. You're telling us like this. You're a Palestinian Jordanian. You believe that the perpetuation of this Palestinian refugee status is a myth because the true homeland of the Palestinians already exists. It's a very unfair division of the region by the British to give 78% of the land to the Palestinians in an area which is called Jordan. So the Jews got 22%. That's not for the Palestinians to touch. The Palestinians have got the country of Jordan, and who's oppressing them is not the Jews. It's
Absolutely
the king
not.
of Jordan. It's
Absolutely
the king
not.
of Jordan. And that's probably why he'd want to have some sort of an October 7th attack, God forbid, because he tried to deflect the attention away from himself and onto the Jews.
Exactly, Rabbi. This is what he's been doing for a very long time. Jordan is the elephant in the room. The king of Jordan is the white elephant in a very dark room. This is crazy. Let's start. What's the biggest Palestinian problems? The biggest Palestinian problem is a statehood. We don't have a state. Yes, the Kurds don't have a state, but guess what? Kurds in every part of the country that has been occupied by 4 governments, they all have citizenship. There is nowhere in any of those countries, Syria, Iraq, Iran, or Turkey, where the Kurds are told, wait, you're not a citizen. You're not going to have a passport. So Palestinian statehood is fixed once we get rid of that king. And for those who are going to say, no, are you crazy? He protects Israel's borders. I'm going to respond to you in a minute. Two, the right of return. Yes, we have the right of return. My parents and my grandparents were kicked out of, expelled in the war, 1948 and then 1967. We have the right of return to Israel, but is it doable? Is it possible? It's going to end the Jewish state and bring another war. Also, 850,000 Jews who were kicked from Arab countries, their descendants are 5.5 million people. They also have the right of return. So
Nobody talks about that.
So if we exercise the right of return, it's not going to happen. So
It's a two-way street.
the Jews have a place to call home. Now the Palestinians in Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Kuwait, Egypt, and even Turkey, they deserve a place to call home, and that place is Jordan. And the laws of Jordan, the Citizenship Act, Article number 3, 1954, says that every Palestinian is a natural born Jordanian unless they follow the Jewish faith. So every Palestinian is naturally a Jordanian. And let's talk about Jordan. Jordan never had, that so-called Jordan government never had its own passport until 1948. They
What
were
was the
using
passport before?
Palestinian passports for 26 years,
Mm.
27 years. They never had the Jordanian currency. They depended on the British Palestinian pound, and up until 1951. They depended even after there was no longer a Palestinian government. They still used our currency because there was no Jordanian state. So the Hashemite Jordanian state is a mess. So you fix the right of return and you fix the statehood by making Jordan Palestine. And number 3, which is the biggest problem, is the Temple Mount, Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Which is the name of this war, according to Hamas, Al-Aqsa flood.
It's exactly, Tawafan Al-Aqsa. This is the overflood of Al-Aqsa. So Al-Aqsa is controlled by the Waqf, by the Hashemite Waqf.
The Jordanians.
Jordanians. So let me tell you, I've been to Al-Aqsa multiple times. Let me tell you what happens in a nutshell, because we don't have plenty of time. When you enter Al-Aqsa, most listeners and viewers don't understand that Jews are prevented from even entering Al-Aqsa after 11:30 a.m. And Jews are prevented from praying inside the shrine at any time before or after 11:30. In addition, it's usually normal. Every day, Jews enter, they pass through it, nothing happens. Well, the minute you enter Al-Aqsa, to your right, you'll find a group of women always sitting there, receiving 3 meals a day, 600 shekels a week from the Jordanian Waqf. They would sit there for months doing nothing. And suddenly they've decided they're going to attack a few Jews. Al Jazeera jumps at it. Quote unquote, Jewish settlers invade Al-Aqsa. So it's all politicized. It's all nonsense. In addition, you can read the 2015 Israeli government statement, and I'm reading it quote for quote, word for word. Jordan's government is responsible in both incitement and action for trouble and unrest in Al-Aqsa Mosque. End quote. The king has been using Al-Aqsa Mosque as one of his, piggy banks, and I've documented that in a video that was, for some strange reason, limited by YouTube and others. From inside Al-Aqsa, I've documented that myself. In addition, once he's gone, this nonsense in Al-Aqsa will stop. Those guards in Al-Aqsa who follow the Waqf are Jordanian guards. How many of them have been arrested for suspected terrorism charges and then miraculously released with pressure from the king of
But
Jordan?
Mudar, if the solution to the Middle East peace process is so incredibly simple, to go back to their passports and their currency before 1951, to recognize Jordan as Palestinian homeland, then why is the UN not talking about it? Why is nobody talking about it? Why is everybody blaming Israel when the solution is right here under our very noses?
Because it's more beneficial for the globalists and the World Economic Forum to keep the conflict flowing. because it's very important to control the Jews, because the Jews are a problem. Because Jews, if you give them the chance to thrive and do what they do, which is to Chon HaOlam, building the universe, Israel would become a hub of peaceful innovation for the globe.
So you're
They
saying
don't want
essentially it's Jew hatred.
Jew hatred plays a great part of it, but let's be clear, Rabbi. For the high rollers, for the big players, they don't hate. They follow the interest, and it's not in their interest for Israel to thrive, and not in their interest to see peace in the Middle East. Nonetheless, this has changed, and I would attribute, thank a very unlikely person for the change. You know who? An idiot called George W. Bush. When he occupied Iraq, get destabilized Israel's security. Israel was way more secure with Saddam.
Because Iraq and Iran were fighting each other.
Yeah, no. And because Saddam was secular. So and because Saddam kept things under control, now we have Iraq controlled by Iran. And in addition, Bush invoked all the trouble, get a lot of U.S. servicemen killed over nothing. This stupidity has created, and mark my words, Rabbi, created an awakening within both the intelligence and military apparatus in both the United States and Israel, plus the UK. So those three capitals, Jerusalem, London, and DC, has had their own quiet coup d'etat, which began with changes introduced by Trump. You don't have to like Trump, but Trump came there mounting a sea of change from within the establishment. They don't want wars. They don't want trouble anymore. It's more expensive for the soldiers to die in war, so that rich idiots by the fireplace are making more money. They don't want that. This has changed. There's a deep military intelligence conviction of the necessity of ending this, and I can assure you the Israeli military is on board with this. I can single-handedly
It's all very interesting. More, all very interesting. But let me ask this question. Is your message being accepted by the Palestinians? Why aren't they calling for Jordan to be their homeland? Why aren't they tearing down the Jordanian king? Why don't they direct their ire towards Jordan instead of to the Galilee or the Negev?
For the very same reason you asking me the question. You asking the question is the answer to your question. Why are they not doing that? Because you don't know that they have been doing that. Let me quote to you a U.S. intelligence cable by the U.S. Embassy in Amman from 2007, leaked and published, put up on the internet by a website called WikiLeaks. We all know WikiLeaks. Google that, go search it. It's called the Grand Bargain. It's a cable by the U.S. Embassy in Amman. And it was produced at the time I was still working for the embassy, which I don't have any connection to that particular cable. The cable states how they found out when they did the research, the right of return of Palestinians in Jordan. And again, Palestinians of Jordan are the majority, 95 plus. I'm going to tell you how I can prove that they're 95 plus percent. According to the cable, they never showed any interest in the exercise of the right of return. And instead, they were interested in achieving social justice and civil rights in Jordan, which they didn't have. In addition, the king, his whole apparatus. Recently, you read the news about Jordanian curricula justifying the 7th of October massacres to students. You can look that up. This is a recent story. That said, the Jordanian establishment has been, the Hashemite establishment, pushing us all into Jewish hatred systematically, and I can go on and on and on with evidence for that about that. Like the king is not even shy to say that. He said in television that, quote unquote, Jews kill our children every 5 minutes in Jerusalem and Gaza. That's the king.
I guess that'll deflect the attention away from Jordan by vilifying the Jews.
Not only deflect the attention, he means it. He's done. So he's inciting people to go protest against the Israeli embassy. You realize how many, the biggest turnout rate in a country where 11 million Palestinians live? 1,000 people. Half of them belong to the Jordanian intelligence, like the Jordanian version of the Shem Bet or the Homeland Security. 1,000 people showing up. What does that tell you about Palestinians? They're no longer interested in war. Let me tell you where the Palestinians stand, and this is an expert's opinion. You can use an expert's opinion to write a PhD based on expert opinion. So it's from an academic research point of view, it's valid, an expert's opinion. The majority of Palestinians is as follows. Palestinians in Jordan do not care. They see the king and their daily humiliation as the key thing they think about. And I've heard words from them like, we wish Netanyahu, quote unquote, Mishan Allah Netanyahu yukhidha wa khallasna. We pray that Netanyahu would take Jordan over.
Huh.
The Jordanian intelligence watches and sometimes translates some of what I say and, publishes it for the public to like kind of thinking that they're making me look bad. In fact, you're not making me look bad. I'm telling you what Jordanian people say, and you know it's true. Two, the Palestinians in the Nashtachim, the West Bank. The Palestinians in the Nashtachim, Rabbi, would make the Hamas terrorists look like angels. My relatives live in the Nashtachim. My relatives live in the West Bank.
Judea and Samaria.
Judea and Samaria, whatever you want to call it. You can call it a banana as long as there's Israeli sovereignty there. As long as
why are they so vicious?
What?
Why do you say that they're more vicious than
because they have been under systematic incitement by the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority is playing the same game the King of Jordan plays. They incite the people, they arm up the people, then they come and tell you, oh, we are the one controlling them.
Right.
So you've heard, I've heard the myth about the first firefighter company in the world, how they used to burn up buildings and then show up to put out the fire and get money.
Interesting. Yeah.
So the Palestinian Authority has totally brainwashed them. And also there has been a segregation in place between Jews and Arabs for the past 30 years. So now they see people like you as monsters and devils with horns. So they are very dangerous if given the chance. And again, you're talking about my own relatives and family members. If you give them the chance, people in the West Bank or Judea and Samaria, they would make 7th of October look like child's play. The people of Gaza, they mostly hate Hamas. I'm not saying this because I want to protect them from what's going on.
But you're saying the people in Judea and Samaria are Hamas?
No, they're much worse than Hamas.
Wow.
They are 10,000 times fold Hamas.
Mudar, this is fascinating stuff, and it looks to me like we're at the beginning of a conversation. The problem is we're running out of time. So before we let's schedule another time to continue this conversation. But before we do so, I'd like to ask you, please, if you could give us a closing comment, maybe some closing words, so we can wrap this one up here today.
I've got news for you. Everything is about to change. America is now more concerned about America, not someone else's interest. And it's key for American interest to end the Arab-Israeli conflict because America now has really vicious and strong and capable enemies. The Arab-Israeli conflict will end. Israel will exercise its full sovereignty over its soil, including Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, and the Jordanian Hashemite king will leave, and a Palestinian president, a secular president, will rule a benevolent autocracy where people will get rich, but they won't be able to call out Israel and call out for murdering the Jews. Again, things are changing. It's going to take time. But before this president finishes his term, before this administration is gone, you will see the end of the Arab-Israeli conflict. And it all goes through a sovereign Israel, sovereign including the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and a Palestinian Jordan. Thank you, and Laila Tov.
Thank you very much, Mudar. We got to do this again. God bless you, my friend, and may all the people of the world, Jews, Arabs, Muslims, Christians, Palestinians, may all of us discover our purpose in this world as children of God Almighty, and be able to recognize our place without having to attack or hurt or condescend against someone else. Salam alaikum. God bless you, my friend.
Shalom.
Shalom and Am Israel Chai. Thank you.
Am Israel Chai, Am Yarden Chai. عاشت دولة إسرائيل، عاشت دولة الأردن الفلسطينية الأردنية. Peace and all. Long live Israel, long live the Jordanian Palestine.
Thank you, cousin.
Assalamu alaikum.